My name is Alice Prohaska. I'm a principal of Somerville College here at Oxford. First of all, I would like to thank all of the organisers of this conference and, of course, especially Raj Kumar for his opening remarks. I am honoured to have been asked to speak at the opening of this conference. It promises to be full of important ideas and information, and a wonderful opportunity to exchange thoughts on good practice in a field where they are so badly needed. I can think of no one better than Raj Kumar to have set it up, with his extraordinary record of success as the founder and inaugurating Vice-Chancellor of OP Jindal Global University. Anyone who's visited the campus of JGU at Sonipat, not very far from Delhi, will have been deeply impressed by the way in which its first building rose from the dusty plain within something like 5 months in 2009, with each subsequent well-equipped addition following at a similar speed. Only the trees, as Raj ruefully admits, could not be forced to match this exceptional record of growth. Equally impressive is the vision of its founder, that this should be from the start a global university with a global curriculum and a global faculty. His persuasive, not to say ruthless, recruitment technique, swooping through the universities of India, Europe, and North America to gather up talented academics and bear them off to Sonipat, has benefited the generations of students who've passed through the university already and has surely laid the foundation for an institution of exceptional quality in the future. It is relevant, too, that Raj is a former Rhodes scholar and also a distinguished exponent of human rights law. Meeting today at Rhodes House, it is appropriate to remind ourselves of the internationalist vision and the intention to change the world for the better that underpin the enterprise of the Rhodes scholarships. I suspect that vision is shared by everyone in this room. All of us will have, as well, some experience of the challenges that face us as we try to implement such a vision in our own organisations. Not just challenges, but compromises, ethical decisions, and difficult choices, as we are reminded very pointedly by the current controversies about how we commemorate Cecil Rhodes himself and whether we should do so. A man whose legacy has brought so much benefit to countless generations, as Raj just said. A man whose name has become synonymous with excellence in academic life and public service, and yet who exemplified in his own business activities a capacity for devastating human and environmental exploitation, which we shrink from being associated with. The legacy of Cecil Rhodes surrounds us here, and I, for one, feel very grateful for it. But partly for that reason, there will be lurking within our discussions of funding models, philanthropy, and the roles and responsibilities of universities some fundamental ethical questions that we must not ignore. This is a conference about higher education in Africa and Asia. Those of us who, like myself, have spent our careers in the United States and Britain, and in some cases in various parts of Europe, inevitably will be bringing to bear experience and points of view that reflect that background. So I ask you to forgive me if my short opening remarks sound rather Anglo-centric. My hope is that meeting today in Oxford, all of us can learn something from each other, and that we may come up with some insights that are genuinely new and important in the enterprise of supporting higher education in Africa and Asia. My college, Somerville, has been deeply involved in interactions with Indian universities like JGU, think tanks, foundations, and individuals as we set up our own Oxford India Centre for Sustainable Development. Now, this is an enterprise designed to offer a place for postgraduate study, knowledge exchange, and the cross-fertilization of interdisciplinary work relating to India and sustainable development within the whole University of Oxford. The centre's origins lie first in Somerville's Indian traditions, which go back to our first law student, Cornelia Sarabji, who entered the college in 1889, 10 years after Somerville was founded, and became the first woman to practice law in India. It goes back to a string of distinguished Indian students since then, including Indira Gandhi, and talk about controversial antecedents. More immediately, the centre began with the funding we received from the Government of India and the University of Oxford together to create postgraduate scholarships for Indian students on courses relating to the acute issues of sustainable development that India faces. And we're delighted and honoured to be able to bring first-rate Indian students to Oxford for training in such a hugely important field. We are honoured too by the attention that is being paid to our plans by leading figures in Indian business and academic life. But it is striking to me that there should be so much anxiety in India about the fact that no Indian university figures among the top 200 in the world rankings. This, in a world where so many people of Indian background and education excel in the stratosphere of Nobel Prizes, international literature, international law and science, and in international academia generally. And I think that that perspective begs numerous questions. We do, as Raj has said, need to ask ourselves what the world rankings mean. And tomorrow's session on metrics and evaluations will be helpful here. But it's a question that will, I think, permeate all of our thinking in this conference. Which models of excellence in the twin and equally important activities of teaching and research are appropriate to different national and regional systems of higher education? With the recent conclusion of the most recent Research Excellence Framework, the REF, in the United Kingdom, British university leaders are asking themselves questions about the intended and unintended consequences of this particular ranking exercise. Our questions to ourselves can be helpful to universities in other parts of the world too. One innovation in the REF 2014 exercise was the introduction of impact measures. I served on the main panel of the REF, which was responsible for assessing the arts and humanities, one of 4 separate subject area panels. The whole question of impact was fraught with difficult and intriguing problems. The rubric that we designed to guide university departments in making their submissions carefully avoided suggesting that economic indicators would trump any others. We were concerned to find ways of assessing the impact of different research activities on the general public, on schools, and one phrase that cropped up quite a lot, on the quality of life. But how to measure such an impact, compared, for instance, with a piece of research that might have translated into, let's say, a high-earning documentary film, was not an easy question. Certain subject areas considered impact in very different ways from each other. Across all the subjects measured in the REF, of course, medical research scored high on impact, finding a cure for some form of cancer, or attacking the question of infections that are resistant to all known antibiotics. These would have an undisputed and measurable impact. But within the area of arts and humanities, research in area studies that supported security studies in the Middle East would surely score high, but what about support for community activities? Research into local history, with its support for museums and amenity groups, could claim high impact here, but necessarily would not register so highly against the criteria of international quality or reach and significance. Some subjects treated impact, for instance in the area of performance arts, as simply part of what they do, so their assessment panels treated their subjects sternly, whereas in some pure humanities research, the standard for making an impact was quite different. Classicists could be very proud of the occasional television program that mentioned their work. Questions of this nature may seem far removed from the concerns of universities in Asia and Africa, but I think they are worth translating. Are the governments and philanthropic supporters of universities in these regions looking for research agendas and teaching curricula that focus on impact? Or, to put it another way, will they be looking for only useful subjects to be researched and taught in their universities? And if so, how will they define those subjects? Famously, British universities receive a far larger proportion of applications to study law, medicine, and engineering from students in Asia and Africa than in any other subjects. We also find that students of Asian and African origin living in Britain have a tendency in that same direction. And this, I believe, is reflected in the curricula of many universities in their countries of origin. I am absolutely delighted that among the audience here is a Somerville-based Rhodes scholar who bucks this trend and is doing important work in biochemistry. A recent piece of educational research that was reported in the general press here found, however, that the attainment of school children improved most dramatically when they were given 1 or 2 hours a week of philosophy in the curriculum. And what are we to make of that? I will return to that at the end of my remarks. Since it's research that drives the international rankings, it is worth dwelling for a few more moments on that. Research partnerships between universities and partnerships with business will be one of the topic of one of today's sessions. Any number of different models will spring to the minds of all of us here. Our Oxford India Centre for Sustainable Development is involved, for example, in a multidisciplinary study of the production, distribution, and consumption of rice in southern India. Social anthropologists share the work of plant scientists, and behavioural economists make an important contribution. We have an informal research project partnership with JNU and the Madras School of Economics, and a developing one with the New Trade Union Initiative. A very new Sanitation Coalition is based at FICCI, the Federation of Indian Trade and Business, and working with Royal Holloway, University of London, to take a systems approach to recycling cleaned wastewater into the food chain. My colleague who handed me this example actually used the word poo. There are close ties between the University of Oxford's research station in Kigali in Kenya and the research that's being done here into the eradication of malaria. Medical schools in Asia and Africa have numerous partnerships for the study of conditions like diabetes, such a huge concern in South Asia. And to take just one more of my own parochial examples, one of our postdocs at Somerville is sponsored by Parkinson's UK in partnership with Johns Hopkins University in the United States and academics in India to develop an app for remote diagnosis of Parkinson's and other muscular conditions using handheld devices. This is potentially transformative for sufferers in rural areas around the globe. Some questions one might ask of such partnerships are, how far are they driven by material considerations of potential commercial profit, or direct and identifiable solutions to present social, economic, and medical problems? Should these indeed be the main drivers? The bias of current global rankings towards award-winning scientific research suggests that there may be deeply rooted trends here which deserve critical examination. And if that is the case, should we be reinforcing those trends by focusing the efforts of our own universities on them? And how should the universities of Asia and Africa respond to assessments that are dictated from other parts of the world? Another question, what is the role of what is often termed blue skies research? And how can we afford to provide for the potentially path-breaking discoveries that it will bring? What was the abstract and theoretical blue skies research that led to some of the examples of applied research that I've just mentioned? Some of our sessions later in the conference may focus, and I hope they will, on the critical issue of local capacity versus international research breakthroughs. The very existence of rankings builds in competition. Should the universities of Asia and Africa be entering into that competition, as I believe many in their academic communities believe that they should? Are their partnerships with other universities like our own liable in any way to distort their own research mission, and if so, how? We need to consider also the careers of our colleagues in universities in all parts of the world, and the need to measure up to international standards for anyone with an ambition to develop an international career. And we should be thinking equally carefully, I would suggest, about the communities in which the universities are embedded. I'm glad to see that that's one question posed for the session that is to come next. To what extent can universities serve an international community of academic excellence at the same time as providing for their own communities? And are those two categories of goal in any way necessarily incompatible, the local and the international? Finally, and to conclude this long string of questions without answers, I'll return to the question of philosophy. Research universities are also teaching universities. Most of us in Oxford believe that with deep conviction. We know that we are educating not only the politicians, bankers, school teachers, creative artists, practicing doctors and lawyers, and generally well-educated citizens of the next generations, we are also producing the world's future researchers. Any leading research university, in my opinion, neglects those combinations of facts at its peril. It is of first-rate importance that we should pay attention in our metrics as well as in all our qualitative measures to the needs and wishes of our students. We need to pay attention to the recruitment of able students from all parts of our nations and communities, and to capacity building among those with relatively few advantages at the secondary school level. We need to work with them to discover the pedagogical methods that will serve them best. We must pay attention to their pastoral needs, whether they be 18-year-olds leaving home for the first time, or, as so many are, individuals with home responsibilities and valued experiences, and above all, great financial anxieties. If we, in universities like Oxford, are concerned to work with universities around the world, as we do in so many ways, we have to pay attention to the experience of cultural dislocation that accompanies the international movement of both students and research academics. Some of the sessions to come may help us to understand the demographics in Asia and Africa that shape their universities, and it seems to me that one of the most important things to understand and then to measure is the value that a university adds to the population it serves. If we can help to shape a value proposition that will influence the way that governments, commercial companies, and philanthropists look upon the enterprise of a university, then our discussions here can make a useful contribution.